Okay. Okay, can you see?
Yeah, now it's up.
Okay.
Now it's up.
So my voice is also audible, right, for all?
Yeah, it's audible.
Okay. So good morning, friends and my seniors who are attending this meeting. So I was told to deliver a talk on structural geology and its significance. And definitely when we talk about the structural geology, we have to give respect and tribute to Dr. Ramsay. So Sajid told me that this meeting is attended by students from BSc first year, second year and third year mainly from SN College Chambaranti. So I think now also for the first years they are learning physical geology and geomorphology, right? No structure, I think. Also second year crystallography and mineralogy. So third year only they will be starting with the structural geology. So in this outset, I would like to share the basics of structural geology first, then we will move to the in detail. So structural geology. So what is structural geology? Structural geology is the study of the three-dimensional distribution of rock unit and their deformational histories. That means when a rock is formed, there may be some structure, or after the formation of rock also because of some deformation that we will discuss in details. The nature, the orientation, the oleum, the size of the rock that changes, that is the variation from the original nature of the rock. So this is mainly falls under structural geology. So structures can be broadly classified into two types: primary structures and secondary structures. Primary structures are those structures that is formed at the time of the formation of the rock. For example, the crystallization of crystallization of magma, we can getting the mineral alignments and all, as well as some the formation of sedimentary rocks. We are getting some cross beddings, fissure beddings like that. So these are the structures that is formed at the time of the formation of the rock. That comes under the primary structures. Secondary structures are those structures that is formed after the formation of rock. This is very important because we are mainly dealing with the secondary structures. The secondary structures are very much important in all point of view in geology. So structural geology is about the understanding the structures of the rock when the rock is exposed to some stress. When it is exposed to some stress, stress means the force that is acting over a unit area. And what is the result of stress? Result of the stress is actually the deformation of the original nature. That means the original nature of the rock may not be there. It will get deformed. That is the distortion of the shape or the form of the rock. So this stress plays an important role in the formation of the secondary structures in the rock. So first about the deformation. Deformation that refers to the change in the orientation, shape and oleum of a rock body when it undergoes a stress. Stress means when some stress is applied to a rock body, the original oleum, shape as well as the orientation of the rock changes. So when apply a stress, the environmental condition, the physical environment is very important because when you break a rock at the surface, it will break. That is a brittle fractures. So when you heat the rock and you break, it won't break. Instead of that, it will start flowing. So you can see these are the physical environment that plays a major role in the deformation of rock or the development of structures. So when we apply the stress to the rock unit, the result is the strain. For example, I'm just showing this. This is when we apply stress to our body. What happened? The result is the strain. So you can see the swelling. It was not there initially because when we applied stress, the leg got swelled. So this is the strain. So this can be referred to the structures or the secondary structures of the rock. When we apply force, the oleum shape as well as the orientation changes. So this is the main background of structural geology. So we'll start with what is stress and what is its role for the deformation of rock. Stress is actually the force per unit area, because most of the people did physics in their +2 level. So you can understand this stress strain relationship. That means when we apply a stress to a body, it will act as elastic up to this point, because elasticity means what? When we apply a stress and release the stress, the body will try to rebound its original position, and this comes under the elastic region. So when we apply more stress, it enters into the plastic region. What is the difference between elastic and plastic region? Because elastic region, the body will bounce back to its original position once the stress is released. But the plastic region, what happens is that even if we release the pressure or the stress, the body won't come back to its original position. There will be distortion in shape, size, as well as volume. So when we give more and more stress, it will come to a particular point. At a particular point, what happens is that the body will get break. This particular point is called a fracture point. But you should know this thing before going to the structure in details. So I think all may be knowing this diagram, stress strain diagram. Okay. So we cannot give a force to a rock. Means with the help of our hand or with the help of a hammer, we cannot create a structure. For the formation of a structure, there should be a huge pressure should act on a rock. So from where this pressure comes? The earth. So for this, you should know the theory of plate tectonics. The theory of plate tectonics was proposed by Alfred Wegener in the year 1911. So what is continental drift hypothesis says? As per his theory, the earth crust as well as the upper part of the mantle united to form a raft or a concrete blocks called plates. There are a number of plates. All our continents include the plates, and the present I will show you in the diagram. So these plates that move over the mantle like a raft. So when two plates collide, huge stress or huge pressure will be created in the rock adjacent to the plate boundaries where it collides. So there comes the importance of stress in geology. Now you can see Alfred Wegener told the continental drift hypothesis based on certain criteria. So you all know that the Pangea concept. During the Permian time, I think Anurima will talk about the Permian extinction and all. So you can see that the Pangea continent was like this. It was a supercontinent at 225 million years ago. But during the Triassic, the continent starts moving apart. So this is the base for the continental drift hypothesis. So during Jurassic, this was the condition. During Cretaceous, this was the condition. And this is the condition of the present day. So on what basis Alfred Wegener told fitness of the continent? Once you fit the present continents together, it forms a mass of Pangea. The shape of the exact Pangea will come. Okay. So second is the fossil evidence. You can see some of the fossils that is in the South America, we are getting in Africa. Some of the fossils in Africa we are getting in India. Like that, some of the fossils in India we are getting in Australia. So once that means that is before Permian, all these continents were united and it was a single mass. Because of the continental drift, this has moved apart. And you can see the ancient mountain ranges. So one of the typical example is that some of the mountain ranges in this margin of this Africa may be coincide with some part of India. We know the southern granular terrain. We all are staying in the southern granular terrain. So southern granular terrain, major portion that came from the Madagascar. So when we do systematic study of the southern granular terrain and eastern part of this Madagascar, we are getting the same. So this comes under the ancient hill mountains. Also the past climate. Based on all these evidences, continental drift hypothesis was proposed by Alfred Wegener. So this is the present continental setup in which you can see the plates. The plate means the crust as well as the upper part of the mantle that is flowing over the mantle. Okay, so you can see I'm just quoting an example for Indian plate and the Eurasian plate. Indian plate is moving further towards the north and it is colliding with the Eurasian plate. You can see this portion is the point of the Himalayas. So Himalayas, this Indian plate is still active, it is still moving. So that's why we are saying that Himalayas are the younger mountains and it is still under formation. So Indian plate is colliding with the Eurasian plate and we are getting the fold mountain. So this is the point of maximum stress, or the result is the strain. So it at the plate margins or at the plate boundaries, the maximum strain we can see, and maximum structures we can see along the plate margin or the plate bound. These are the major plates. In addition to that, there are lot of minor plates also there. So this is the planar view of the continents or the plate movement. If I am taking a sectional view of this plate movement, you can see there are two types of margins that can be possible. One is the convergent margin, one is the divergent margin. So first I will talk about the convergent margin. Convergent boundary or the convergent margin, two plates will collide. So what happens when two plates collide? The plate which is having the specific gravity higher will move towards down, and those having a lower specific gravity that moves towards up. Okay, so this is actually what happens when this plate move, and this zone is called subduction zone. When one plate move with respect to another to the bottom, that forms a subduction. The subduction is very important because this is actually a highly strained zone, because this is the point where two plates collide. So here we are getting maximum stress or maximum strain, and the rocks that is present over here is having the maximum structural deformations. Okay, so what happens in the case of divergent plate margin? When two plates that move apart from each other, there forms a gap. So this gap, along this gap, what happens? The mantle material will come to the surface. So this is the reason for the formation of mid-oceanic ridges that is produced in the ocean. So divergent plate margin that leads to the mid-oceanic ridges, and the convergent plate margin leads to subduction zones, followed by the strain zones or the shear zones. So here we are getting the shear zones that we will discuss in detail in the coming slides. Okay. So before going to the deformation or the structures, we should know this depth against the temperature diagram. So this is the Earth's surface. Okay, this is the Earth's surface, and I have divided this into three parts, up to this part and this red one and this one. So what happens is that up to 100 degree, there won't be much change. You know geothermal gradient. That means geothermal gradient means when you move towards the subsurface, at every 100 meters, 2 degree temperature will increase. That is called a geothermal gradient. So when you move to 100 meters, the temperature increases. So up to this depth, the rock will be solid. Okay, so when any deformation that happens at this particular point, it will break, it won't flow. But what happens when the temperature increases, when it reaches this red portion, what happens? Some of the minerals will start melting. Okay, so it is given as brittle plastic area. Here what happens is that here the material will flow as well as the material will break. So you can see after 300 degree, that is about 10 kilometers depth, you can see that entire thing is plastic. There is no breaking. Whatever the force you apply to a rock, it won't break. Instead of that, it will flow. So why I am telling this diagram is that all the structures are mainly based on these three conditions. All the structures that I will discuss one by one. So main structures that's seen in the rock, that is, I told that up to this point, brittle deformation, this red point is brittle ductile deformation, and further down is actually the ductile deformation. You know what is brittle, what is ductile. Okay. So major structures in the rock. These are the major structures we can classify. Under brittle deformations, we have fracture, joints, and faults. We will discuss one by one. And under ductile deformations, we are having faults as well as shear zone structure. So first we will discuss on fractures. So fracture is actually a result of brittle deformation. fracture is actually any separation in the geological formation. Fractures can be divided into two. This joints as well as faults that forms by brittle deformation comes under fracture. So fracture can be of two types. It can be joints or it can be a fault. A fracture that commonly occurs when the stress applied exceeds the rock strength that results in the breaking or the cohesion, loss of cohesion along a particular weak plane. And the fractures are very much important. Mainly, the fractures are very much important for the movement of the subsurface fluids, especially water, hydrocarbons, and all. These fractures, if these fractures are interconnected, it is easy for these hydrocarbons to move. Also, in a simple example, in a shorter depth aquifer, you can see in the most of the rocky terrain, people are drilling boreholes or borewells. So these borewells can be fertile only if there is sufficient fractures are there so that water can move freely. So these fractures plays an important role in geology. So the first type of fracture is actually the joints. So we will discuss joints. Joint is actually a brittle fracture in which there is no displacement. There will be a breakage, but between the two broken pieces, there won't be any movement. Instead of that, only we can see the separation. Joints may be parallel joints. It may be vertical joints. It may be horizontal joints. So you can see, we can call as a joint set when we are getting a set of parallel joints. It is called as joint set. And if one or more or two or more joints are there, it is called as joint system. So you should know what is a joint. Joint is a type of fracture formed as a result of brittle deformation in which there is no movement between the two blocks. Joints can be vertical joints, it can be horizontal joints, and joint set is actually a set of joints or parallel joints or evenly spaced joints, and two or more joints together to form joint system. And we will discuss about the type of joints. Type of joints first is actually the tectonic joints. The tectonic joints are the joints that is formed as a result of the movement of the plates, what we discussed in the earlier slides. Because of the movement of the plates in the convergent plate boundary, we can see the tectonic joints. You can see when two compressive stress is applied in a brittle condition, we can see the cracks that develop on the surface. Second is called hydraulic joints. Hydraulic joints is actually the joints that is created by the pressure of the water, especially the pore fluids. It can be vertical and it can be horizontal. These hydraulic joints are very much important because in most of the petroleum industries as well as in the coal industries, this hydraulic fracturing is done, or hydraulic fracturing is done by pumping water in a high pressure so that the topmost part will get fractured, and that is the hydraulic fracture, and the material, that is, it may be hydrocarbon, it may be natural gas, it can be extracted easily. So hydraulic joints is very important. And next is exfoliation joint, because even first BSc students also knows what is exfoliation. That is, because of the heating and freezing of the rock for a longer period of time, the cracks will be developed, or the rocks will be peeled out like onion skin. So this comes under the exfoliation joints. And fourth one is the unloading joints. Unloading joint means when a rock is under subsurface and it is overlaid or piled up by many other rock units. Once the overlying rock units is removed, it may be by erosion or it may be by the upliftment, like collision of the two continents and all. So what happens is that this material that is under high pressure is now exposed to the surface, that is low pressure area. So what happens, because of the unloading of the overlying material, the fractures that develops, and this is the called unloading joints. And the fifth one, and the interesting one, is actually the cooling joints. Typical example are columnar joints. I will show you one more photo. The columnar joints is nothing but the joints that are formed at the time of the formation of the rock, when the lava oozes out from the subsurface to the surface in a shallow marine condition. We are getting the cooling joints or the columnar joints. In India, in the southern India, we have a geological museum, that is at the St. Mary's Island in Karnataka. We have the columnar joints in southern India. So So that is one of the geological monument of Geological Survey of India. Like that, you can see this Devil's Tower. Most of the people may be knowing this is in Wyoming, United States. And this is the first national monument of United States of America. And this is a columnar joint. You can see this is a single monolith. It is made up of a single rock. You should remember, this is one of the biggest monument in the world with a single rock or a monolith. And the rock it is formed is called as it is the phonolite. The rock phonolite is actually a mix of felsic as well as the mafic material. So this is made up of a rock called phonolite. Okay. So this is one of the interesting feature or the structural features that can be added to the geotourism also. Okay. So this is about this fractures or joints. So the importance of joints is that engineering geologists, because after passing out of MSc, there will be some specialized branches like exploration geology, engineering geology, paleontology, like that. There will be different streams will be there to get expertised. So in which one of the stream is the engineering geology. These joints are very much important for engineering geologists, because engineering geologists are the people who gives the area for the construction of dam, channels, bridges and all. So in this case, what happens is that if they are not clearly studying these joint sets properly or without plotting the joint sets, it will cause a huge disaster. If you are giving a dam site in a highly jointed area, what happens? Because of this reservoir of pressure, the joints may reactivate. That is called reservoir induced seismicity, and many disaster can happen. So engineering geologist plays a major role to identify the location for the dam sites, tunnel sites, and all the engineering structures. So these joints are very much important in that aspect. So these are the importance of structure. I'm just telling about the importance of structure. Why we want to study the structure? Because it has a great importance in building the nation. Especially, I will come to the mineral sector that I will discuss more. And this is the background for the engineering geology. Now, before going to the fault and other, because fracture and joints, what we have seen, there is no much movement. Only there is a crack or fracture. But you can see now what we are going to talk is about fault and other structures in which there will be a movement will be there. So before going to movement, you should know what is a strike and what is a dip. Strike is actually, in a simple sense, structural geology can be in a single line, can be say as is a study of planes and lines. That is the structural geology. So you can see some rock units are sliding like this. You can see maybe this one unit, this may be another unit, this may be another unit. Okay. So what is a strike? Strike is a direction of a line. It's a line. Strike is a line. Direction of a line formed by the intersection of a rock strata. This is the rock strata and an imaginary horizontal plane. Horizontal plane will be always have an angle of 0 degree. So an imaginary horizontal plane when meets the rock strata, that forms the strike. Okay. So strike is the direction of a line that is formed by the intersection of a bedding plane or a inclined strata with the imaginary horizontal line. This is called a strike. And another term I will use here, that is called a dip. Dip is actually the angle that is measured perpendicular to the strike. That means at what degree this rock unit is sliding with respect to the 0 level. So that is called a dip. Okay. So dip is always perpendicular to the strike and dip is always measured in this vertical plane. So this is a strike and dip. Sajid sir, I am audible, right?
Yeah, you are audible, Rajesh.
Okay. So the strike and dip is very much important for the students, because if you have any doubts, you just clear it. Okay. Because Sajid sir will teach you, because these are the things that to be taught in the field. Okay. So always remember the strike and dip, because I will be talking with respect to the strike and dip of the beds from the next slides. So again, I am telling you the strike is the direction of a line formed by the intersection of the bedding plane or the rock strata with an imaginary horizontal plane. And the angle that is measured perpendicular to the strike is called a dip. Clear? So now we'll move to the next structure called fault. So we have already studied fracture and its importance, joints and its importance. Now the fault. So fracture you have studied, joint, that those are very simple structures. Now we are slowly moving to the some complicated structures. Fault is actually a fracture only in which the either side of the rock will move. That means joints there was no movement, but in the case of fault there is a movement. One block will move with respect to another. Okay, so the surface in which the movement takes place is called as fault plane. You see, initially this block was a single unit. Because of some pressure or force, what happens is along this weak plane, this blue color plane, this block got separated, and this has moved separate from this original. So now this is the present condition. Okay, so now if this block is moved in a horizontal way, it is called as horizontal slip. When it is moved in a vertical way, it is called as vertical slip, or it can call as vertical dip slip. Okay, and there is another slip where there is both horizontal as well as vertical component is there, that is called oblique slip. So all these slips together called as net slip. So this is the main terminology that we are applying for the faults. Okay, now we will discuss the types of faults. So before going to the fault, I told that this is the fault plane. You can see these two blocks were united together once upon a time, and now it got separated. Now it got separated means this block has moved vertically down, and this block that has moved horizontally. So this horizontal separation is called as throw, and the vertical separation is called as throw, and the horizontal separation is called as heave. So these two terminology you should know. That means when two blocks are separate, when one block move with respect to another vertically, that is called as throw, and when it is moved horizontally, that is called as heave. Okay. Now I will explain the throw and heave in plan as well as section. So this is the plan, or a two-dimensional. Okay, so we are seeing in a map. So this is a coal, this black one is a coal seam, and this is a coal seam. Both the coal seam was united once upon a time. Now because of this faulting, along this fault plane, one fault has moved up, one block has moved up and other moved down. So now this coal is separated by the fault plane. So if you draw a cross section, it will looks like this. Okay, you can see that this block has moved along the fault plane and this block away from the fault plane. Why this fault is important? If you are an exploration geologist, this fault is very important because exploration mainly includes the drilling of the boreholes to know the subsurface minerals or subsurface mineral body. So consider this black one as a mineral body or a coal body. And now what happens is that because of the faulting, you are getting coal here and you are getting coal here. Okay, the surface, but you are also thinking that you may get coal here. So without studying the fault, you are giving a borehole. See, you are giving a bore. This is a block diagram, borehole. So the borehole move along the fault zone. Okay, so you may not get this coal or this coal. So you will not get any minerals. So fault plays a very important role, and the study of the fault in the field is a art to know the movement of the block. So that I will discuss in detail. Now the nomenclature of fault. Basically the faults are divided into two, normal fault and reverse fault. So when one fault happens or one break happens, but one block that move down and other block that move up along the fault plane. So this is the fault plane, and along the fault plane, those block that is moving down is called hanging wall, and those move up is called a foot wall. So this is the criteria for normal fault. In the case of a normal fault, hanging wall will move down and foot wall will move up. Okay, and another fault is called a reverse fault. Reverse fault, what happens is that the hanging wall will move up along the fault plane. That means in an opposite direction of the fault plane, and foot wall will move down. Usually this happens. This normal fault usually happens by the gravity. Whenever some break or fracture is there, due to gravity, along with the gravity it will move down. But here you can see the reverse fault, it is moving away from the gravity. That means there will be some force. Force from where? It may be at the plate margins. Because of the high pressure, the thrusting may occur. Thrusting means actually it's a type of fault only, but it's a reverse fault. Because of the some pressure, this is moving away from the gravitational force. That means away from the means opposite to the fault plane. So this is the reverse fault. So this is the basic nomenclature of fault: normal fault and reverse fault. Now another structures that related with the fault is actually host and graben structure. So what happens is that if it is a single mass, consider this as a single mass. When two faults occurs, here on fault and here on fault, and two fault plane are dipping in the same direction. Dip already I discussed earlier. So these two fault planes are dipping in the same direction. What happens? The center block that moves down. So now the condition is that this two portion will be uplifted. It may be occurs in the form of some mountain, and in between you are getting a valley. So this is called as a graben. This valley portion is called as graben. So it also happened the another way. If the fault plane is dipping in the opposite direction, you can see it is dipping in the opposite direction. What happened? The center portion will be elevated due to gravity, and this portion will move down. So now this center portion is elevated. So we can see the material here itself in the valley portion also. The hill and valley portion is having the same litho units. So from that we can identify host. The host, you can see one of the field photographs. You can see there is one fault fault here and another fault here, and this cold band has moved down and this has moved down. So center portion is now uplifted. So this is a host structure. So this is a host and graben structure that results as that is formed as a result of faulting. Next, the classification of the faults based on the fault pattern. This is also very important. We have seen normal fault, reverse fault. These are the different classifications of the faults. Normal fault, reverse fault, host and graben structures that is produced as a result of fault. Next is actually based on the pattern of the fault. Can classify the parallel faults. Parallel faults means you can see this figure. All the faults are parallel to each other. They are moving parallel to each other. Anastomosing array of fault means one fault will be branching out from the another fault. You can see all the faults are connected and one is branching out from the another. This is typically we can see in the shear zones. And n-echelon array of faults. Here you can see one is overlapping over another. This is called n-echelon array of faults. Next is conjugate array. Conjugate array, you can see there will be faults, but these faults are not connected. There will be all the faults are individual faults. They are separate faults. They are not connected. That is called a conjugate array of faults. Next is relay array. Relay array means nothing but you can see one parallel set of faults and another parallel set in the opposite direction. Both are meeting. So this is the relay array of faults. Random array means there is no specific direction. It is it is just we can see an irregular arrangement of these faults. Peripheral faults, I think the image is not much clear. The peripheral of faults is actually nothing but some circular faults, that is you can see at the periphery of the rock. This exfoliation for joints, all this creates these peripheral faults. And radial fault means from a central point you can see the radiation. For example, the plumose structure. Plumose structure is actually feather-like structure that is usually formed by the radial faults. From a center, different cracks are developed. It appears like a star. Okay. So these are the classification of faults based on the fault pattern. Now the main classification of faults is actually into that is based on the angle of the fault plane. This is the fault plane. Based on the angle of the fault plane, it is divided into two: high angle fault and low angle fault. High angle fault is having an angle greater than 45 degree. Low angle fault is having an angle less than 45 degrees. So this is the classification based on the dip of the fault plane. And genetic classification of faults. That means genetic classification of faults, it can be of dip slip fault and strike slip. Dip slip means the movement along the dip direction. That means like this, what you have seen. This can be of normal fault. and this is the reverse fault. That is, there is a dip component will be there. And here in the case of strike slip fault, what happened? There will be the horizontal movement. That means one block will move towards us, one block will move away from us. Based on this also we have classified into two. Strike slip fault means if the block is moving towards our right hand, that is called as right-handed fault or dextral fault. And if the block is moving towards, if you are standing over the fault plane, if in the field, if you go, you can see a fault, and if you are standing over the fault plane, you can see that one block is moving towards your left side, that is called sinistral fault or left-handed fault. So this is very important thing that you should know. Basically, there are two faults, normal fault and reverse fault, and strike slip fault. Strike slip fault means based on the relative movement. If it is moved towards the right, towards our right hand, that is the dextral fault, and if it is moved towards the left hand, it is the sinistral fault. If somebody having doubt, if you are standing at this point, if it is moving towards right, it is dextral, and you go and stand at the other side also, you can see the same will be coming to your right hand only. So there is no change if you are changing the direction. If you are standing here also, here you can see the right hand is only, means right hand block is only moving. Here also the same. You can stand here or you can stand here. Your left hand block is only moving. So this is the classification of fault based on the movement. So now how to identify a fault? Because it is a very difficult or it is very tricky to identify the faults in the field, because most of the fault is not visible in the surface. Because once the fault happens and the block is exposed to the surface or some movement takes place, there will be deposition of other layer or sedimentary layer, or it may be erosion. So no record of the faults can be seen directly. In most cases we cannot see directly on the earth surface. So when we go to field, so based on certain criteria we can identify the fault, and I will discuss one by one with the help of block diagram. First is the discontinuity of the structure, and everything I will discuss with the help of block diagram. Second is repetition and omission of strata, silicification and mineralization, that I will discuss now, because silicification means when two blocks move each other. Okay, what happens? Temperature increases because of the movement. As a result, what happens is that the quartz that present in the rock will get partial melting. When the quartz undergoes a partial melting, the quartz will attain mobility. Mobility means it starts flowing or moving. So what happens? It will move and fill in the vacant cracks and they get silicified. So if you are getting highly quartz rich area, you should suspect for a fault. Like that, you can see some mineralization, that also I will show. Also, we can see some fault related structures like slick and side. Slick and side means actually the one side of the block that has moved down with respect to another. If other side is exposed, we can see some lines or marking in the other block, that is called slick and sides. Then breccia. Breccia means irregular crystals, angular crystals. Gouge. Gouge is actually when the movement takes place. Most of the cases the faults occurs in a brittle environment, right? So what happens is that there will be powdering of the rock unit. This powder will be preserved within the fault plane. So there is the fault gouge and pseudotachlite. Pseudotachlite nothing but because of the partial melting, some pseudotachlites are formed. That is, they don't have any crystal structure. They appears like a glass. Okay, glassy material. So these all are the characters or features to identify the faults. Okay. Also from the physiography. Physiography means from the nature of the landscape also we can identify, like a fault scar, triangular face, that I will discuss. And if a river is flowing in a straight course, immediately it is taking a 90-degree course or a sharp turn. So that indicates a fault. Also water seepage zones. We can see the water seepage zones. For example, in the Varkala, if you are going to Varkala cliff section, Varkala is a typical example for the near tectonic fault, because one portion has moved down to the sea and other portion is exposed. So we can see many of the springs we can see in the Varkala. These are all related with the faults. Okay. Now we'll discuss one by one. Discontinuity of the strata. Discontinuity of the strata means if the one is one litho unit and 2 is another litho unit, 3 is another litho unit, 4 is another litho unit. So if you walk along this direction, you can see immediately the one is ending and immediately two begins. That means there is a discontinuity of the strata or the structure. So in that case, we should suspect a fault. Second is actually the repetition of the strata. You see, this is a block diagram, and this is the fault plane. So you imagine this is the fault happens. You can see the movement like this. Now what happened? 1, 2, 3, 4 are the Hito units. Now what happens? You can see this 1, 2, and 3 has come down. Okay. So if you are walking along in this direction, immediately 3 again we are getting 2, again 3, again 4. That means the same strata is repeating. So this is called repetition of strata. If you are getting such type of things, you should suspect for a fault. And omission of strata. Omission means disappearance of strata. So this block were united once. Now because of the faulting, it has moved on 1, 2, 3, 4. And here what you can see that when it moved down, now it was exposed. Now it is eroded. Now this is the condition of the plane. This surface is fully eroded. Okay. Now you can see that after 1 immediately you are getting 3. We are losing 2. We are not getting 2. That means immediately we should expect 2, but we are getting 3. This is also because of the faulting. So these are the important criteria to identify the faults in the field. Now I have discussed about triangular faces. If you are going to some hilly areas or hillocks, initially it was considered this is actually a block diagram only, means a surface. When fault occurs at this particular point, and this may be considered a fault plane, you can see that because of the faulting, and this is the weakest plane, right? So because of the erosion, what happens is that the one face of the hillock, we can getting some triangular faces. So if you are getting some triangular faces, that is also an indication of the faults in the field. Now, so we have discussed about the fault. The fault as well as joints is occurs up to this point. Already we have discussed about this diagram. So in the brittle deformation, we are getting breccia, fault gouge, etc. And this will happen, the fault will occur up to this point only. Up to a temperature of 100 degree, we can expect faults, mainly brittle deformation. Okay. Now these are some of the field photographs. These are the slicken side marks. We can see one block is exposed and we are not getting the another block on the right side. So here we are some lines. So these are the slicken side marks. And you can see some of them. This is some mineralization. This is tremolite. Tremolite is actually one type of mineral that you can see that the minerals are aligned in a particular plane. If it is aligned in a particular plane, means that is also indication of a fault. Also, you can see if you are seeing a section, this is actually a coal seam or a coal seam outcrop. Earlier, this coal and this coal was united, and this white unit and this white unit was united. Now, what happens because of this? This has moved down. So this is the direct evidence of the fault. Here also we can see separation of this particular coal seam by a fault. Okay. So I think fault is clear. Sajid sir, anything to be discussed?
Rajesh, if you want to interact, you can interact.
Okay. Or better, I think I will finish.
Finish it and we will have a question.
Okay, right. So we have discussed about the fractures, joints and faults and its importance in geology field. Now we will discuss another structure called folds. These folds are another structure which is very important. We cannot expect a fault in a brittle deformation condition because here there is no breaking. Here only folding. Okay. So when this is a horizontal strata, when we apply a force, what happens when we apply a force in a higher pressure temperature condition, the rock will get fold instead of fracturing. Instead of getting fractures, this is the movement. Okay. I told that first itself that when the stress is given, the environment, the physical environment is very important because in a higher temperature condition, what happens is that this strata will fold instead of getting fractured. Okay, so once the compressive force is applied in a higher pressure temperature condition, what happens? One strata is getting folded and the second is following that, third is following that, like that. So we are getting something like this. And in the case of a fold, this elevated portion or this curved portion or the convex portion is called as anticline, and this concave side or this depression is called as syncline. These two terms you should remember. Anticline and syncline is actually the general term that is given to the convex as well as the concave sides of the folds. Now coming to the geometry of the folds. Okay, fold is actually a structure that is formed under high pressure, high temperature conditions. So the entire strata is folded. So there are certain points to be discussed. That is the inflection point. When a strata is folded, the point from which the fold begins is called as inflection point. That means from this point the fold starts. This is called inflection point, and the fold will be curving like this and it is going to this point. Okay, and second is the hinge portion. This top convex surface is called as the hinge portion, and you can see the hinge line. Hinge line is actually the line of maximum curvature. Hinge line is actually is the point of maximum. It is having many points. All these points connected to form the hinge line. So the hinge line is actually the point of maximum curvature. And there is another thing called fold axis. Fold axis is just an imaginary line. Fold axis is an imaginary line that itself moves to create a fold. Okay, and another surface, when we break the fold, means or separate the fold from the center, there will be a plane, and this plane is called as axial plane or axial surface. So in detail we can discuss in this diagram. So in the case of a fold, there will be inflection point, and this is the hinge, and this is the limb. The topmost portion is called a hinge, and this portion is called a limb. And the limb again, it forms another folds, then it forms the limb of the second fold, and now this is the hinge of the another fold. Okay, and this is the axial plane, and this is the axis. Most of the time the hinge line itself is the axis of the fold. That is the point of maximum curvature. Okay, now we can discuss the folds based on its geometry. First is called the plane cylindrical fold. Plane stands for this axial plane. The plane stands for this axial plane. The axial plane means the plane that divides the fold into two parts. If you are drawing a line from the center of a fold, the axial plane that divides the fold into two. So based on this axial plane, it is divided into plane cylindrical. That means cylindrical means the cylindricity. Cylindricity means the roundness or the symmetry of the fold is called the cylindrical folds. So plane cylindrical means if we are having a fold here and the same geometry is in the other side also, and if we are dividing, we are getting the same symmetry. That is axial plane as well as cylindricity is there. This axial plane is equal to this axial plane, and there is no change in the axial plane. But come to the second one, plane non-cylindrical folds. What happens to the plane non-cylindrical folds? Here, because of some deformation, the cylindricity is destroyed, but the axial plane of this part is same as the axial plane of this part. This is called a plane non-cylindrical fold. That means the cylindricity of the fold is no longer there, but the axial planes are parallel. And non-plane non-cylindrical folds. Non-plane non-cylindrical means what happens because of, again, once the fold is formed by a stress, later deformation results in the refolding of this fold. That we will discuss in the superposed folding. And here what happens is that here the axial plane is also non-parallel and it loses the cylindricity. That is called a non-plane non-cylindrical. So this is the basic classification of the fold based on the axial plane and the cylindricity of fold. Okay. Now, based on the interlimb angle, I told about what is a limb. Limb is actually this portion. After hinge, we are having the limb, and this is the limb. Based on the angle between the two limbs of the fold, the folds are classified into gentle fold. Gentle fold means it's actually the limb angle between 180 to 120, almost open, very open. And next is the open fold. The interlimb angle is 120 to 70, and closed folds 70 to 30, tight fold that is 30 to 0, And isoplanar fold, the interlimb is angle is almost 0. It is just vertical. It looks like a vertical fold. So this is the classification of folds based on the geometry. Geometry in the sense that axial plane and plunge. If you can see that if the fold is like this and the axial plane is like this is called as vertical folds because axial plane is vertical. Like that, upright fold. The fold is like this. Axial plane is, the fold is upright. It is standing like this. And now here come the recliner fold. Recliner fold means both axial plane and the fold is having some angle. That is called a reclined fold. And recumbent fold means the axial plane is horizontal. If the axial plane is vertical, it is called vertical folds. If the axial plane is called if axial plane is horizontal, it is called as recumbent fold. This recumbent fold is very important because this is asked in most of the competitive exams. What is the fold having a horizontal axial plane? And recliner fold means there will be some angle. It is not vertical or even it is not horizontal. This is the fold classification. Now, so we have studied about the fold classification. So as you know, this lecture is also a tribute to Dr. Ramsay. So Ramsay has mainly suggested 3 types of folds. That is very complicated, but I will try to say in a simple way because Ramsay has given or classified the folds into 3. That means once the fold is formed, again the fold is folded, again the fold is folded. Number of times if it is folded, what will be the shape of the fold? So this is explained by Ramsay through his superposed folding concept. So Ramsay type 1 fold. Ramsay type 1 fold is also called as dome and basin folds. You can see in this block diagram, initially there was a fold. This fold is again refolded. Now what happens? One portion is elevated and other portion is like this. That means one forms a dome. That means you can see the cross section. Dome, what happens is that the birds will be dipping outside, towards outside. Okay. But this is an example, a field photograph of a dome. That means the bed is dipping towards outside. Okay. But in the case of a basin, the birds will dip towards inside. That you can get a boat shape. It looks like a boat, right? You can see a boat like folds. That means here in the center we are getting the younger formation and outer we are getting the older formation. But in the case of dome, we are getting outside here. If you are cutting this hill like this, we are getting this shape. So we are getting the outer formation at this particular point and inner formation towards outside. So this is the first interference pattern of the superposed folding by Ramsay. So second is fold, type 2 fold, that is also called as boomerang fold. So you know what is a boomerang? Boomerang is actually, you see the cartoon serial Mowgli, right? So Mowgli is using a weapon that will bound, once it throws, it will come back to you. That is called boomerang. And this boomerang is usually used by the tribes of Australia for hunting. Okay. So you can see this is a field photograph. This is from our Palakkad area. This is from our Palakkad area. So you can see that the fold, one fold is like this. This closure is there. And again, it is refolded. See, this is the second fold. Second fold is just like this. That means this was one fold and it is folded by another fold. So this shape is look like a boomerang. You see, you can see that it is look like a boomerang. So this is Ramsay type 2 or boomerang folds. Okay, this is mostly common folds that we can see in the shear zones. And third type of fold, Ramsay type 3 fold, is called hook folds. Hook folds, what happened here? What is the peculiarity here? The axial plane of first fold and the axial plane of the second fold are perpendicular to each other. So this is the axial plane of the first fold. Now it is folded. Now this is the axial plane of the second fold. Okay. So we are getting two axial planes which are perpendicular to each other, forming the boomerang shape. Now coming to hook folds or Ramsay type 3 folds. Ramsay type 3 folds, you can see this was a fold. This was a fold. Here you can see a closure. Now this fold is again refolding. You can see this is also photograph from our Palakkad area only. Refolding. Here what happens? This is the axial plane of the first fold and this is the axial plane of the second fold. That means the axial plane of the first fold and axial plane of the second fold both are parallel. Then it forms hoop folds. So these are the three types of superposed folding proposed by Dr. Ramsay. First is actually Doman basin. Second is boomerang fold, in which both the axial planes are perpendicular to each other. And in the case of hoop fold, the axial plane of this fold, first fold, and axial plane of the second fold both are parallel. So it is also called as coaxial refolding. That means both the axial planes are parallel. That is why it's called as coaxial refolding. So these are about the types of folds. So we have discussed about fracture, joints, faults, and folds. Now the last structure I will discuss, that is more complicated structures, that is the shear zone structure. So because this topic is a vast topic, so I am just reducing it to 1.5 hours. So I am just only touching the basic things only, not going into details. Okay. So now the structures what we can see in the shear zone, that is called as the shear zone structures. Shear zone structures can be formed by brittle, ductile, and ductile condition. So again, I am quoting this diagram. This is the Earth's surface. When the material moves down up to this point, what deformation takes place? Brittle deformation, fault will form, and up to this point what happens? Both brittle and plastic deformation will be there, because this is a transition zone. Here at this particular depth, we are getting both faulting as well as folding. So after 300 degree, we are getting only folds. That means we won't get any faults after 300. So we can, why it is happening? Because you know the hardness of quartz as well as feldspar. Quartz is much harder than feldspar, but when the temperature increases, the quartz melt first. Feldspar can withstand the temperature up to 450 to 500 degree. So you can see the quartz will act as a plastic nature, but the feldspar will remain as a crystal. That's why in most of the rocks you can see the quartz will form as a ribbon. You can see the elongated quartz, but you can getting the crystals of feldspar, because those rocks that is formed under a ductile deformation is called as mylonite. This term mylonite you should keep in your mind, because this is actually a general term. Any rock can be a mylonite. If a granite that is formed under or deformed under a ductile condition, that is called as granite mylonite. If a quartzite is deformed under this condition, this is called as a quartzite mylonite. If gneiss is actually gneiss mylonite. So the mylonite is actually any rock that is formed under ductile deformation. Okay, under 300 degree below 10 kilometers depth. So here the quartz will act as a ribbon-like nature. So we will discuss the type of shear. Shear means actually when we talk about shear means we discussed about fault. Okay, there will be a relative movement, but shearing that is taking place under a higher temperature, what happens is that one force is acting like this and another force is acting like this. The rock in between is getting deformed. How it is deformed, that we will discuss. So this is the way you can see a shear in the field. Shear and fault, the main difference is that both there will be a separation. This is a shear plane. You can see that this rock is serving like this and this is serving like this. There is no fracture or no breakage, only the material is flowing along this plane. You can see the flow of material. You cannot see any breakage. You can see the material is flowing like this. This is a typical identification of a ductile shear zone or a shear plane. And this is a shear plane. And you can see this white band and this white band were united once. Now it is separated. But you see there is a connection still there. It is not fully separated. So this is a shear plane. And because of the shear movement, the flowing of the material takes place. There is no separation. So this is the characteristic features of a ductile shear zone. Now I discussed about mylonite. Any rock that formed under a ductile deformation is called as a mylonite. It's a common term. So mylonite can be again classified into three: protomylonite, mylonite, and ultramylonite. Protomylonite means if the deformation is less, you can see the more clast. Okay, 90 to 50% of the clast, that is called a protomylonite. This clast may be mainly of feldspars. Why? quartz will start melting at this particular temperature, but feldspar will only remain intact at a higher temperature up to 450. So all this clast that we can see in the shear zone is mainly the feldspar clast. And myelinite means the clast. The clast means the crystal content that is present in the rock up to 50 to 10% is called as porphyroclast. In most of the cases, we can see 50 to 10% of the porphyroclast. That's why we are commonly calling it as myelinite. And if the intensity of shearing is more and more, means highly sheared, even the feldspar will get powdered, or it may get melt with the increase in temperature or increase in the pressure and all. Only 10% or below 10% of the clast will be preserved in the rock. Such type of ductile deformed rock is called as ultramyelinite. So this is the classification of myelinite based on the clast content. Now, how to identify these features? Okay. So first year students may not be knowing what is a foliation, what is a lineation. I will just say foliation is nothing but, rock consisting of several minerals, mainly almost all the rocks consisting of 90 to 95% quartz and feldspar, right? And rest is the mafic minerals. So what happens is that when the increase in the temperature takes place or metamorphism takes place, all the minerals of the same nature will try to align in a plane. That plane is called a foliation plane. So that's why in the gneiss and all we can see some banding or layering, black and white layering you can see. That means all the black layers that moves in the one side, in the one plane, and the white layers move to the other plane due to increase in temperature and pressure. So this plane is called foliation. Like that, because of this faulting and all this folding, you can see that some minerals will be aligned in a plane. That is called a lineation, or some markings will be there, or that shows the movement of one block with respect to another. So that is the lineation. Then you can see grain size reduction because it is happening at a high temperature. So this myelinite rocks is having a grain size reduction will be there. Then there will be a structure called SC fabric. I will show the photographs, and there I will discuss. Then asymmetrical porphyroclast, that also I will show in the photographs. So these are the different types of the criteria that you have to know before doing a shear zone mapping, like folds, asymmetrical folds, S fold, Z folds, and all. We are getting many types of folds. So shear zone mapping is actually a real challenge for any geologist because it is very, very, very tricky, and we have to use all our sense to identify the structures. We have to identify the contacts because it is not easy to work in a shear zone. So these are the shear zone structures. I am not going much detail into that because this may take one entire session to discuss about the formation of these structures. So I was talking about SC fabric, right? So these are the S fabrics, and these are the C fabrics. S is actually the clast, and C is the shear plane. Because when the movement, you can see the movement is happen like this, the crystal will develop a tail and it will move in both the direction. So the crystal that will be remaining in the center, that is the S plane, and this tail will form the C plane. Okay, so these are some complicated structures for the BSc students. They won't understand all those things clearly. So these are the shear zone structure you should keep in mind. Sympathetic and antithetic shears. That means if there is a main shear is there, for example, Palghat Kaveri shear zone in Kerala. So we can see many minor shears within the shear zone. So those shear may be dextral shear or sinistral shear. Dextral, sinistral we discussed. That is the block that is moving towards our right side is actually dextral, sinistral, like that. Okay. So if the minor shear is parallel, or if major shear is dextral and minor shear is also dextral, that is called sympathetic. And if the major shear is dextral and minor shear is sinistral, that is called antithetic. So you should understand, sympathetic shear will be parallel to the master shear and antithetic will be opposite to the master shear. Okay. Now you can see one of the clast. This is the asymmetrical porphyroclast in the thin section. This is not the outcrop, or outcrop means any rock that is exposed to the surface is called an outcrop. Okay. Now this is the thin section. what we do is that for detailed study, we can see this is an asymmetrical class. You can see there's an asymmetry. If we break the class, we are not getting the equal division because one tail is moving down and the other tail is moving up. So this presence of this asymmetrical class is an indication of the shear moment. You can see the shear moment like this. Now, another structures that we have to discuss is actually the Boudin structures. Boudin is nothing but if there is a combatant body, when any hard body is bounded by the soft body. So consider this is a hard body like a quartzite, and it is bounded by gneiss. Gneiss is comparatively soft. Okay. So when the movement takes place, what happens? Maximum stretching happens, right? So all these gneisses will try to come much closer and closer, but this combatant body will try to resist the force. So what happens? What happens means it will try to break instead of getting close. It try to break. So what happens? So this is actually the breaking point, and this is the breaking point. Okay. So this combatant body is now in this condition. This structure is called a pinch and swell structure. You can see this is the swell structure and this is the pinch structure. That means because of the extension, the combatant body will be elongated, stretched, and it will start separating from each other. Before separating, it is called pinch and swell structure. Once this body gets separated out, that is called as Boudins or the Boudinage. The structure is called Boudinage, and individual blocks is called Boudins. B-O-U-D-I-N-S. And the structure is called a Boudinage. Okay. So this is also a shear zone structure. Now coming to the last phase, the shear zone we can identify in the thin section. You can see that one cluster of feldspar is like this. One cluster of feldspar is like this. Okay. This is under thin section. You can see there is a movement. This band and this band were united. Now this band has shifted. So this is also an indication of shear. Also recrystallization. I have told that because of the increase in temperature, the quartz will recrystallize. Feldspar will remain intact and the quartz will recrystallize. That also we can study under thin section. Okay. You can see that the entire material is recrystallized. You can see this is in the thin section. Okay. So almost we finished the talk. Now I will just brief about the role of structural geology and why it is important. Because engineering, a role of structural geology in engineering geologists I have discussed. Now these structures are actually the main source for the fluids to come to the surface from the subsurface. Okay, so this acts as a vent. This mineralized fluid migration is largely controlled by porosity and permeability of the rock. If the rock is highly porous and highly permeable, permeable means all it is connected by fractures or joints, then mineralized fluids that can come from the subsurface, and now then we can extract it. So exploration point of view, that is a very positive thing. Permeability is increased by the creation of structure formed by the deformation, because as I discussed, the permeability may increase by the structures. That means when faults occurs, all these faults are connected like joints. If it is connected, then that it acts as a vent for the mineralized fluids to come up. Also these faults as well as the shear zones are the important zones, because these faults as well as shear zone not only at the surface, it will be extending to the subsurface. So it is extending up to the mantle. So the mantle material can also come along the shear zone. This shear zone is actually the weak zone. Okay, shear zones are the weak zones, and through that weak zones, mineralized fluids that can come to the surface. For example, what are the mineralized fluids? The hydrothermal fluids, that is maybe rich in gold, silver, molybdenum, all the precious metals that can come from the subsurface to surface. So this is the main role of studying structural geology. Once you are competent in knowing the structure of the area, you can directly go and search the mineral phases there. Okay, because you will be knowing at which point there will be the minerals. Okay, so structural geology plays a very important role for the building up of nation, and in the mineral sector, engineering sector, and almost all the sides, means all the streams of geology. So this is about my talk, and this is Ramsay. Unfortunately, we missed him this month only. January 2021 only he passed away, and this talk is a tribute for this great man, because he is basically a field structural geologist, and all the structures is well explained with the basic concepts. So he is considered as the father of the modern structural geology. Thank you.